I realized my private pond had been sold to an HOA before anyone bothered to tell me. It was a Saturday morning, just after 8, when I drove down the narrow gravel lane behind my property to check the water level at Ellery Pond.
Not here.
That lane had always been quiet. It cut through a line of pines, dipped past an old wooden gate, and opened onto the small pond my grandfather dug with a rented excavator in the 1960s. My father taught me to fish there. My mother planted willows along the bank. After my father passed, that pond became one of the few pieces of our family land I refused to sell. But that morning, the wooden gate was gone. In its place was a polished green sign with gold letters that read, Willow Ridge HOA, Community Pond Access. Beyond it, I saw folding chairs on the grass, two kayaks near the water, children throwing rocks from the bank, and grown adults casting fishing lines into my pond like they had paid admission. Someone had installed a small dock where the shallow bank used to be. Solar lights lined the path. A picnic table sat under my mother's willow tree. Near the entrance, a woman in an HOA polo shirt was handing out bright wristbands to residents as if my family's pond had become a resort amenity overnight. For a few seconds, I did not even get out of the truck. I just sat there with my hands on the steering wheel, watching strangers walk across land I paid taxes on, land my family kept even after we sold almost everything else around it. Willow Ridge Estate sat on property my family had once owned, but the pond was never part of that sale. The deed kept it separate. The shoreline stayed with us. The access road stayed with us. My father had made sure of that. The HOA did not care. They had placed benches on my grass, widened my lane, hung their sign at my gate, and advertised Ellery Pond as a private community fishing and nature retreat for residents. People had bought homes believing the pond belonged to them. Some had paid extra for lots near it. And now, when I stood on my own bank, I was the one being treated like an intruder. A few weeks later, that same sign would be lying face down in the bed of a maintenance truck. The dock would be removed. The website would be rewritten. The HOA would be forced to close access, refund angry buyers, answer questions from county officials, and explain why they had sold a pond they never owned. Before you decide this was just a small misunderstanding over a little water, ask yourself this and leave your thoughts in the comments. What would you do if an HOA turned your family's private pond into a selling point, then handed out wristbands on your land like you were the trespasser? I did not scream at the residents. I did not drag the kayaks into the road. I pulled out my phone, recorded the sign, the dock, the wristbands, the picnic tables, and every person using the pond. Then I drove back to the house and opened the old file box my father had labeled in black marker. Ellery Pond. Do not lose. That box held the deed Willow Ridge forgot existed. And it was about to make them refund every buyer who paid for my pond. My name is Mason Ellery, and I was 42 years old when Willow Ridge Estates discovered that a private family pond looked better in their brochure than it did behind my fence. I was not rich. I was not powerful. I was not the kind of man who enjoyed arguing with lawyers, boards, or people wearing name tags at community meetings. I worked as a residential electrician, mostly crawling through attics, replacing old panels, fixing outlets in rental houses, and doing the kind of practical work nobody notices until the lights go out. My life was simple. I liked it that way. The land was not simple. My family had owned pieces of that property outside Rockwell County, North Carolina, for generations. At one time, according to my grandfather, the Ellery land stretched almost 100 acres across pine woods, pasture, and a low wet area where spring water collected after heavy rain. In the early 1960s, my grandfather rented an excavator, dammed part of the low ground, and shaped it into a pond. It was not a fancy lake. It was not wide enough for speedboats. It was not something a developer would have cared about back then. To us, it was everything. My father stocked it with bluegill and bass. My mother planted willow trees along the soft southern bank because she said every pond needed something graceful leaning over it. My sister and I learned to fish there before we understood patience. Every 4th of July, my grandfather would sit under the trees with a cooler beside him and tell the same stories about how the pond almost swallowed his old tractor during construction. After my father got sick, the land started shrinking. Medical bills came first. Then back taxes. Then repairs on the house. Piece by piece, my family sold off land we never thought we would lose. The biggest piece went to a developer who promised a tasteful residential community with walking paths, preserved trees, and respectful boundaries. That land eventually became Willow Ridge Estates, with its stone entrance, clubhouse, manicured lawns, and HOA board that spoke about lifestyle like they had invented peace and quiet. But my father refused to sell the pond. He made that clear at the closing. Ellery Pond, the shoreline buffer, and the small access lane from our remaining property were reserved to the family. The survey showed it. The deed showed it. The sale documents showed it. My father kept copies of everything in a labeled file box because he had a habit of saying that land only stayed yours if the paper trail stayed alive. I did not understand how right he was until the HOA tried to take the pond after he was gone. When my father passed, we scattered part of his ashes near the old willow on the south bank. Not in a dramatic ceremony. Just me, my mother, my sister, and a quiet evening with frogs making noise near the reeds. That spot became sacred in the way ordinary places become sacred when they hold someone you loved. I still went there after long workdays. I still checked the water level after storms. I still picked up branches, cleared the overflow pipe, and cut the grass around the bank even when nobody else saw it. Willow Ridge residents saw the pond differently. To them, it was scenery. A selling point. A pretty view behind their new homes. A place that looked like it should belong to the neighborhood because it sat close enough to their fences to feel convenient. Some residents were respectful. A few asked permission to take family photos near the trees, and sometimes I said yes. A father once asked if he could bring his son fishing for an hour, and I allowed it because he asked like a decent human being. That was the rule. Ask first. The HOA never liked that rule. Rebecca Sloan, the Willow Ridge HOA president, had mentioned the pond several times before the incident. She called it a natural community feature. She said residents felt connected to it. She said the association wanted to maintain a harmonious relationship with adjacent landowners. Every phrase sounded polite until you listened carefully. What she really meant was that she wanted access without ownership. I told her no each time. No community fishing program. No shared picnic area. No HOA dock. No permanent path. No resident passes. No signage. No maintenance agreement that could someday be twisted into control. I did not hate the residents, but I was not going to turn my father's pond into a clubhouse amenity because Rebecca thought it would make Willow Ridge feel more exclusive. If you have ever inherited something that does not look expensive to outsiders but means everything to your family, you understand the line I was trying to hold. Sometimes the most valuable property is not the biggest house or the newest car. Sometimes it is a muddy pond with old trees around it, because your father's hands shaped that bank and your mother's flowers still come back every spring. That was what Willow Ridge never understood. They saw unused potential. I saw the last piece of my family's land that had not been packaged, marketed, and sold. For years, I believed the deed would be enough to keep that boundary clear. The developer knew what had been sold and what had been reserved. The county records were public. The survey was recorded. There should have been no confusion. But people who want something badly enough often call their desire confusion. And Willow Ridge wanted Ellery Pond. Not because they loved it. Not because they understood it. Not because they had any right to it. They wanted it because a private pond looked beautiful on a sales brochure, and beautiful brochures sold expensive houses. That was the mistake that cost them. They thought my family had only kept the water. They forgot we had kept the paperwork too. The first sign that something was wrong was not the crowd. It was the trash. A week before I found the HOA sign at the gate, I drove down to Ellery Pond after work to check the overflow pipe because we had 2 days of hard rain in the forecast. I expected fallen branches, maybe a little mud around the bank. Instead, I found 2 soda cans near the reeds, a plastic worm container beside the trail, and a child's blue flip-flop half buried in the grass near the shallow end. At first, I tried to explain it away. Maybe a teenager had slipped through the trees. Maybe one of the Willow Ridge kids had wandered down without understanding where the HOA land ended. I had dealt with that before. It annoyed me, but it was not the end of the world. Then I saw the gravel. Someone had widened the narrow lane that led from the Willow Ridge side toward the pond. Not by much at first, but enough that fresh gray stone covered the old dirt track. A few small solar lights had been pushed into the ground along the edge, the kind people use to make a backyard path look expensive. Near the bank, 2 new wooden benches sat under my mother's willow tree. That was when my stomach tightened. Those benches had not been there the week before. I walked the entire bank and found more changes. A patch of grass had been flattened for what looked like a picnic area. A metal trash can had been placed near the water. A post had been installed near the lane, though the sign had not been attached yet. At the northern bank, where the water was shallow and the mud was soft, someone had started framing a small dock. Not a huge dock. Not a marina. Just a neat little wooden platform big enough for people to fish from, take pictures on, or slide a kayak into the water. But it was on my pond. I took photos of everything. The gravel. The benches. The trash can. The dock frame. The fresh tire marks. The cut branches along the lane. Then I went home and sent Rebecca Sloan an email asking why Willow Ridge contractors had been working around Ellery Pond without permission. Her answer came the next morning, written in the careful language of someone who believed politeness could cover trespass. She claimed Willow Ridge had been told the pond area was part of the original community amenity plan. She said the HOA was only improving resident access to a feature that had been marketed since the early phases of the neighborhood. She said the association wanted to avoid confusion and make sure the area was safe, clean, and enjoyable for families. She never once said Willow Ridge owned it. She never once mentioned a deed. She never once attached an easement. Instead, she acted as if the number of people expecting access was more important than the person who legally had it. By that weekend, the situation exploded. The HOA sent an email to residents announcing the first summer pond weekend at Willow Ridge. The message encouraged families to bring fishing poles, picnic blankets, kayaks, and cameras. It described Ellery Pond as a peaceful private nature retreat reserved for Willow Ridge residents. It even mentioned that wristbands would be available at the access point to help preserve the exclusive feel of the amenity. Exclusive. That word almost made me laugh. They had taken my family's pond and made it exclusive to everyone except my family. When I drove down that Saturday morning, the lane was crowded with golf carts and SUVs. Children were throwing rocks into the water. Adults were casting lines from the bank. 2 residents had already put a kayak in the pond. Someone had tied balloons to one of the benches. A woman in an HOA polo stood near the new sign handing out wristbands, and the sign was no longer a blank post. Willow Ridge HOA, Community Pond Access. I stepped out of my truck and walked toward the bank slowly, because I knew every angry move I made would be remembered differently by people who already thought they belonged there. A man near the water told me residents paid dues for access to the pond. A woman with a fishing rod said the sales office had shown her the pond when she bought her house. Another resident mentioned that lots near the pond had cost more because of the view and access. That was the first time I understood how deep the lie went. This was not just an HOA accidentally letting a few people fish where they should not. The pond had been used to sell homes. It had been packaged as a benefit. People had paid real money because someone had shown them my water, my bank, my trees, and called it theirs. Rebecca arrived later that morning, walking down the gravel lane with the confidence of someone arriving at her own event. She looked past the dock, the residence, the wristbands, the fishing lines, and the sign, then treated my objection like an inconvenience. Her position was simple. Willow Ridge had relied on the developer's representations. Residents had been promised a pond amenity. The HOA had invested money improving access. Removing it now would harm the community. In her mind, my ownership was a technical problem. The community's expectation was the real issue. That was when the anger finally settled into something colder. I realized Rebecca did not think she was stealing my pond. She thought she was correcting reality to match the brochure. Over the next few days, the pond became busier. People came after work. People came at sunset. A group of teenagers left bait containers near the dock. Someone dragged a folding table under the willow tree. Tire tracks from golf carts cut into the soft edge of the bank. One kayak scraped against the old overflow pipe, and a child pulled up one of the plants my mother had placed along the southern side years earlier. I put up a small sign near the lane that said private property. Ellery Pond. No HOA access. It was gone by the next morning. In its place, I found a letter from Willow Ridge taped to the old fence post. The letter accused me of interfering with established community access and warned that the HOA was prepared to involve its attorney if I continued disrupting resident use of the pond. It mentioned long-standing reliance, resident expectations, amenity value, and potential damages to the association. I was not a member of their HOA. I had never signed their rules. I had never agreed to share the pond. But somehow, they had turned my refusal into a threat against them. That afternoon, I checked Willow Ridge's website. There it was in full color, a glossy photo of Ellery Pond under the willows, with a caption calling it a private community fishing pond and nature retreat. A downloadable brochure used the same image. A sales page for remaining lots described exclusive access to natural water features, including Ellery Pond. I saved everything. If you are listening to this and you own land near a development, please do not ignore the marketing. A sign is evidence. A brochure is evidence. A website screenshot is evidence. A casual phrase like community amenity can become the sentence that proves someone tried to sell what they never owned. Comment your thoughts, because this is where most people either panic or start documenting. I chose the second option. I did not drag the dock out of the water. I did not shout at families. I did not block the lane with my truck, even though I wanted to. I installed cameras, photographed every change, saved every email, downloaded every brochure, and wrote down every day residents used the pond. Rebecca thought the crowd made her position stronger. She thought that if enough residents used Ellery Pond, I would look unreasonable for taking it away. But she misunderstood what ownership means. 100 strangers standing on private land do not make it public. And somewhere in my father's file box was the deed proving Willow Ridge had sold a dream built on someone else's water. I opened my father's file box that night with dirt still on my boots. The box was metal, dented on one corner, and heavier than it looked. My father had kept it on the bottom shelf of the hall closet for as long as I could remember. When I was a kid, I thought it held something exciting, maybe old photographs or war medals or money hidden away for emergencies. But when I got older, I learned it held the things my father considered more valuable than cash. Deeds. Surveys. Closing documents. Tax receipts. Boundary maps. Easement papers. Copies of letters from attorneys. Every boring piece of paper that proved where our family's land began and where someone else's ended. Across the front, in black marker, he had written 3 words. Ellery Pond. Do not lose. I carried the box to the kitchen table and opened it carefully. The first folder held the old survey from when the developer bought the surrounding acreage. The second held the closing documents from that sale. The third held county tax maps, a recorded plat, and a copy of the deed that reserved the pond, the shoreline buffer, and the access lane to the Ellery family. I read that section over and over. Ellery Pond, including shoreline buffer and private access road, reserved to grantor and lawful successors. Grantor meant my father. Lawful successors meant me. Willow Ridge had not bought the pond. They had not bought the bank. They had not bought the lane. They had bought land around it, land near it, land with a view of it, but not the thing itself. That was the first calm breath I had taken all day. Then I started building the record. I made a folder on my laptop and labeled it Willow Ridge Pond Trespass. Inside, I saved everything by date. Photos of the HOA sign. Videos of residents fishing. Screenshots of the summer pond weekend email. Pictures of the dock, the benches, the solar lights, the gravel, the trash, and the tire marks along the soft bank. I downloaded the brochure before they could change it. I saved the website page as a PDF. I saved the letter accusing me of interfering with community access. Then I checked my cameras. The footage was worse than I expected. One camera showed an HOA maintenance cart driving down the access lane with tools in the back. Another showed a board member unlocking the temporary chain near the Willow Ridge side and waving residents through. A third showed a woman from the sales office walking two potential buyers down to the pond, pointing toward the dock, the willow trees, and the water like she was presenting a feature on a model home tour. That clip changed everything for me. Because until then, part of me still wanted to believe this was HOA arrogance, not a larger scheme. But when I watched a sales agent use my pond as a selling point, I understood that Willow Ridge had turned my family's property into money. The next morning, I went to the county clerk's office. I brought the file box, a notebook, and printed photos of the HOA sign. The clerk helped me pull the recorded deed, the subdivision plat, the tax parcel map, and the documents from the original sale to the developer. The public record said the same thing my father's file said. Ellery Pond remained outside the Willow Ridge HOA parcel. The shoreline buffer belonged to my parcel. The private access lane was not common area. There was no recorded recreational easement for the HOA. No fishing easement. No picnic easement. No dock rights. No agreement giving residents access. The only thing we found was a temporary construction access clause from years earlier, allowing the developer to move equipment along part of the lane while the subdivision was being built. It had an expiration date tied to the completion of construction. It did not allow recreation. It did not transfer to the HOA. It did not survive forever. And it definitely did not authorize wristbands and weekend fishing events. I paid for certified copies of everything. After that, I hired a licensed surveyor. He came out 2 days later and walked the pond with a GPS receiver, a set of old plats, and the expression of a man who had seen too many people confuse landscaping with ownership. He marked the boundary with bright flags around the shoreline. Then he placed flags along the access lane and near the dock. By the time he finished, the problem was visible even without reading the deed. The HOA sign stood inside my property. The dock sat inside my property. The benches were inside my property. The gravel expansion crossed into my access lane. Even the picnic table under my mother's willow tree was on the wrong side of the line. I photographed every flag. Then I called Dana McBride. Dana was a real estate attorney in the county seat, the kind of attorney who did not waste words and did not get impressed by HOA letterhead. I sent her the deed, the survey, the county records, the HOA notice, the website screenshots, the brochure, the summer pond weekend email, and the camera footage of the sales agent leading buyers to the pond. She reviewed it all and called me back the next afternoon. She explained that Willow Ridge had at least 3 problems. First, they appeared to be trespassing and physically altering private property. Second, they had installed improvements like a dock, lights, signage, gravel, and benches without showing any right to do so. Third, and most dangerously for them, they had marketed Ellery Pond as a community amenity to residents and buyers even though the recorded documents did not give them ownership or recreational access. That third problem was the one that could make their own residents turn against them. Because if people paid more for homes believing they had exclusive pond access, then the HOA and developer were no longer just fighting me. They might have to answer to every buyer who relied on that promise. Dana told me not to confront anyone at the pond anymore. She told me to keep documenting, preserve everything, and avoid giving Rebecca a chance to make me look aggressive. So I did exactly that. For the next week, I became quiet and methodical. Every time a golf cart went down the lane, I saved the clip. Every time someone fished from the dock, I saved the clip. Every time trash showed up near the bank, I photographed it. I kept a log of dates, times, vehicles, and damage. I wrote down when the water got muddy near the shallow edge from too many people walking in and out. I saved the tire tracks pressed into the wet grass. I saved the image of a child standing on the dock Rebecca's HOA had no right to build. If you are listening to this while dealing with an HOA, developer, or neighbor who keeps acting like paperwork is a technicality, save this part. Paperwork is not a technicality. Paperwork is the wall they hit when confidence runs out. A deed, a survey, a tax map, a permit search, a screenshot, a camera clip, these are not boring details when someone is trying to take what belongs to you. By the end of the week, Dana had enough to prepare a demand letter. But before she sent it, she asked me to check one more thing. She wanted any proof that Willow Ridge had advertised the pond before the weekend event, not just after. I spent that night digging through cached pages, old social media posts, sales listings, and neighborhood announcement emails. Near midnight, I found a PDF brochure from the first phase of Willow Ridge marketing. There it was on page 6. Enjoy exclusive access to Ellery Pond, a private fishing and nature amenity for Willow Ridge residents. The photo underneath was my pond. My willow tree. My shoreline. My father's water. I sent it to Dana without writing anything else. 10 minutes later, she replied with one sentence. They did not just use your pond. They sold it. And that was when the entire fight changed. Dana's demand letter went out on a Monday morning, and it did not sound like an argument. That was the part one appreciated most. It did not call Rebecca a thief. It did not accuse every resident of knowing they were trespassing. It did not threaten revenge or make emotional speeches about my father. It simply placed the facts in order and let the documents do what documents do best. It identified Ellery Pond by parcel number. It attached the recorded deed, the county tax map, the new survey, the original sale documents, and the clause reserving the pond, shoreline buffer, and private access road to my family. It included photos of the dock, the benches, the HOA sign, the widened gravel lane, the picnic table, the solar lights, and the wristbands being handed out near the water. Then it attached the brochure. Enjoy exclusive access to Ellery Pond, a private fishing and nature amenity for Willow Ridge residents. Dana put that line right beneath the deed language proving Willow Ridge did not own Ellery Pond, did not control the shoreline, and did not have any recorded recreational easement. Seeing those two documents together was almost surreal. One was a legal record. The other was marketing. One told the truth. The other had sold the lie. The letter demanded that Willow Ridge immediately close pond access, remove the community access sign, stop all resident use, take down the dock, remove the benches and lighting, preserve all internal communications, stop advertising the pond, reimburse my survey and attorney costs, restore the damaged shoreline, and provide any document they believed gave the HOA the right to use or promote the pond. For 2 days, Rebecca said nothing. Then her attorney responded with a letter full of polished phrases and almost no proof. He said Willow Ridge had relied on developer representations. He said residents had long understood the pond to be part of the community lifestyle package. He said removing access would create confusion and disappointment for homeowners who had purchased with that amenity in mind. Dana read that sentence to me over the phone and paused. With that amenity in mind, she said. That helps us. Because they had just admitted the pond was used as a selling point. What they did not provide was more important than what they wrote. They did not provide a deed. They did not provide a recreational easement. They did not provide a recorded access agreement. They did not provide a permit for the dock. They did not provide proof that the shoreline buffer belonged to the HOA. They did not provide anything showing they had the right to invite residents onto my land. Instead, Rebecca sent a separate email that made everything worse for her. She wrote that the pond had been intended as a Willow Ridge amenity since the neighborhood's early development stages, and that Mason Ellery's sudden objection should not be allowed to erase years of community reliance. Intended. That word became the crack in their wall. Dana explained it to me in plain English. An intended amenity is not ownership. A brochure is not a deed. A sales promise is not an easement. And community reliance does not magically transfer private property from one parcel owner to another. If Willow Ridge sold homes using access to a pond they never owned, then their problem was not just with me. Their problem was with every buyer who believed that promise. Then Dana found the email that changed the case completely. It came from the developer's old project file, sent years earlier between a project manager and a sales coordinator. The message said, "Pond parcel remains outside HOA ownership, but visual access and amenity language may increase lot appeal." I remember sitting at my kitchen table when Dana read that line to me. Pond parcel remains outside HOA ownership. There was no misunderstanding after that. Someone knew. Someone inside the development process knew the pond had not been transferred to the HOA, and they still used it to increase lot appeal. They still let residents believe access came with their homes. They still allowed Rebecca's board to build a dock, widen the lane, install signs, and hold a weekend event on land they had no right to control. That was when the power shifted. Until then, Rebecca had treated me like one stubborn landowner standing in the way of a neighborhood amenity. After that email surfaced, I was not standing in the way of anything. I was the owner of the property their marketing had quietly borrowed. Dana sent the full evidence package to County Code Enforcement, the Planning Office, and the Developers Council. She raised questions about unpermitted dock construction, unauthorized land disturbance near a shoreline buffer, trespass, property damage, and misrepresentation connected to sales materials. She also demanded that Willow Ridge issue a written correction to residents before another person entered my pond area. The county responded within 48 hours. They confirmed there was no approved community dock permit on my parcel. No recorded amenity easement. No HOA ownership record. No approval showing the pond access lane as common area. The planning office also confirmed that the temporary construction access from years earlier had expired and did not authorize recreational use. Rebecca tried one last time to control the story. She sent a neighborhood email saying pond access was being reviewed due to a documentation dispute with an adjacent owner. She did not say the adjacent owner held the deed. She did not say the dock sat on private land. She did not say the brochure had advertised something Willow Ridge never owned. She made it sound like I had created confusion by suddenly caring about a pond that had always belonged to me. But the residents were already asking questions. Some of them had saved their closing packets. Some had listing sheets showing pond access. Some had emails from sales agents mentioning fishing, kayaking, and nature weekends. One man even forwarded Dana a message from a sales representative saying, "All Willow Ridge residents will enjoy exclusive Ellery Pond access." Exclusive access to someone else's property. If you are listening to this, save this part and share it with anyone buying into a new development. Beautiful words in a brochure do not prove ownership. Ask for the plat. Ask for the deed. Ask for the easement. Ask whether the amenity is actually owned by the HOA or simply sitting nearby while someone uses clever language to sell the view. By the end of the week, Willow Ridge's website changed. The pond photo disappeared. The amenity page was edited. The phrase private fishing and nature retreat vanished. The summer pond weekend announcement was deleted from the resident portal. The sales office stopped answering questions directly and started telling buyers to contact management. Rebecca had once said my old family pond could not interfere with the lifestyle of an entire community. But the deed did not care about lifestyle. The county did not care about brochure language. And the sentence in that old developer email had turned their community pond into exactly what it really was. A private pond they knew they never owned. The county inspector arrived the next Tuesday morning, and Rebecca showed up 10 minutes later pretending she had not already lost control. She came in a navy blazer, sunglasses, and the same calm expression she used in HOA emails when she wanted a lie to sound organized. Behind her were the Willow Ridge property manager, a developer representative, and an attorney who looked like he had been pulled into the situation after the damage had already been done. Dana stood beside me near the access lane with a binder under one arm. I had never been more grateful for boring paperwork. The inspector started at the old gate line, where the HOA sign had already been covered with a tarp. He looked at the gravel they had spread, the solar lights along the lane, the picnic table under my mother's willow tree, and the small dock built into the northern bank. Then Dana handed him the deed, the survey, the county parcel record, the tax map, the expired construction access clause, and the brochure calling Ellery Pond a private fishing amenity for Willow Ridge residents. He read quietly. That was the moment Rebecca's confidence began to crack. The planning officer asked the HOA attorney for any recorded easement granting recreational access to the pond. The attorney said they were still reviewing historical development documents. Dana calmly pointed to the county records and said no such easement existed. Then the inspector asked for the dock permit. No one had it. He asked for approval for shoreline disturbance. No one had it. He asked for proof that the access lane was common area. No one had it. Finally, he asked why the HOA had installed signs, lights, benches, and a dock on a parcel that county records showed belonged to me. Rebecca tried to answer with the same language she had used on residents. She said Willow Ridge had always understood the pond to be part of the community lifestyle. She said families had relied on access. She said the HOA was only trying to make the area safer and cleaner. The inspector did not write down lifestyle. He wrote down unpermitted improvements. The surveyor placed flags around the shoreline buffer while everyone watched. One flag went beside the dock. Another beside the picnic table. Another by the HOA access sign. Another near the gravel lane. Each flag made the truth more visible. The improvements were not close to my property. They were not accidentally touching my property. They were inside it. The county ordered Willow Ridge to close pond access immediately while the matter was reviewed. No fishing. No kayaking. No resident events. No dock use. No maintenance work. No advertising the pond as an amenity. The HOA had to notify residents that access was suspended because ownership and permitting records did not support the use they had been promised. That email went out that afternoon. By evening, Willow Ridge's resident forum was on fire. People were angry, but not at me anymore. Some residents posted screenshots from their sales packets. Others said they had been shown the pond during home tours. One family wrote that they had paid a lot premium specifically because the sales agent said the pond was part of the community package. Another homeowner asked why dues had been used to build and maintain a dock on land the HOA did not own. 2 days later, Willow Ridge held an emergency meeting at the clubhouse. I sat near the back with Dana. I did not speak unless she told me to. I did not have to. The residents did most of the work. One man stood up holding his closing folder and asked Rebecca whether the HOA owned Ellery Pond when his house was sold. A woman asked if the board had ever verified the deed before advertising pond access. Another resident asked whether they were going to receive refunds for premiums paid on lots marketed with access to a private amenity. Rebecca tried to call it a misunderstanding. Then Dana stood, held up the developer email, and read the line out loud. Pond parcel remains outside HOA ownership, but visual access and amenity language may increase lot appeal. The room changed instantly. That sentence did what no speech could have done. It showed residents that someone had known the pond was not part of Willow Ridge, and that the language had been used anyway to make lots more attractive. The HOA attorney asked Dana to stop discussing documents in an open meeting. That only made the residents louder. By the end of the night, Rebecca was no longer defending a pond amenity. She was defending why the HOA had spent money improving private land, why residents had been sold access nobody could prove, and why the board had threatened me for interfering with property I legally owned. County code enforcement followed with a written notice. The dock had to be removed unless a valid permit and property authorization could be produced. The signs and lighting had to come down. The disturbed shoreline had to be restored. Willow Ridge had to stop using the pond in marketing materials, and the developer had to correct any sales documents that suggested guaranteed access. That was the first time the phrase refund appeared in writing. Not from me. From the residents. If you have ever wondered why property records matter, this is why. A glossy brochure can fool buyers. An HOA email can fool residents. A confident board president can fool an entire room for a while. But when the county, the survey, and the deed all point to the same truth, the lie has nowhere left to stand. And Willow Ridge had built its prettiest amenity on a lie. The dock came out first. It was almost poetic, watching the same contractor who had built it return with a pry bar, a cordless saw, and a face that said he wished the invoice had never existed. This time, no one wore HOA polo shirts. No one handed out wristbands. No children ran along the bank. No fishing lines crossed the water. The county notice had turned Ellery Pond from a community lifestyle feature back into what it had always been on paper. Private property. The workers removed the dock in sections and stacked the boards on a trailer. Then they pulled the solar lights out of the ground, took away the benches, lifted the picnic table from under my mother's willow tree, and scraped the HOA signpost out of the dirt near the old gate. The gravel they had spread along the access lane had to be narrowed back to the original private road width. The damaged bank was reseeded. The tire ruts were filled. The trash was hauled away. An environmental consultant came out to check the shoreline buffer because the county wanted proof the disturbance had not affected drainage or erosion around the pond. Willow Ridge paid for all of it. They paid for the survey. They paid part of Dana's legal fees. They paid for shoreline restoration, cleanup, and the removal of every improvement they had placed on my land without permission. Their insurance carrier got involved, then their developer's attorney got involved, then the residents' attorneys started asking questions of their own. That was when the refunds began. They did not call them refunds at first. They called them settlement credits, amenity adjustments, and buyer accommodation payments. But everyone knew what they were. Several homeowners had paid premiums for lots marketed with access to Ellery Pond. Some had emails from sales agents. Some had closing packets with the brochure inside. Some had even been walked down to the pond during private tours. Once the developer's own email surfaced, the one admitting the pond parcel remained outside HOA ownership, the story became impossible to polish. At the next HOA meeting, Rebecca Sloan looked smaller than I had ever seen her. She tried to explain that the board had relied on development materials and believed residents had a reasonable expectation of access. But the room was done listening to soft phrases. Residents wanted invoices. They wanted timelines. They wanted to know who approved spending dues on a dock built on someone else's pond. They wanted to know why I had been threatened for protecting property the HOA never owned. Rebecca lost her position before the end of that month. 2 board members resigned. The property management company was replaced. The new board passed a rule requiring deed verification, title review, county approval, and recorded easement confirmation before Willow Ridge could advertise, improve, maintain, or collect money for any amenity touching land outside the HOA parcel. It sounded obvious, but obvious rules usually arrive after expensive mistakes. As for Ellery Pond, it got quiet again. I rebuilt the old wooden gate with cedar posts and a plain chain. I put up one small sign, not a billboard, not a threat, just a fact. Ellery Pond. Private family property. No HOA access. Then I planted new grass where the benches had been. I replaced the torn plants near the southern bank. I sat under my mother's willow tree one evening after work and watched the water settle in the orange light. For the first time in weeks, there were no golf carts, no strangers, no wristbands, no phones taking pictures of a place they had been told belonged to them. Just frogs. Just wind. Just the pond my grandfather dug and my father protected with a file box full of paper. I never hated the residents. Most of them had been misled. They were sold a picture, and they trusted the people who sold it. But that is the danger of letting a brochure replace a deed. A beautiful photo can make private land look like a promise. A confident HOA president can make trespass sound like community planning. A developer can turn someone else's family history into a bullet point under amenities. But ownership does not work that way. A pond does not become public because people picnic beside it. A shoreline does not become common area because an HOA trims the grass. A family property does not become a lifestyle feature because someone prints it on glossy paper. I did not win because I yelled louder than Rebecca. I did not win because I had more money than Willow Ridge. I did not win because I embarrassed residents or chased families away from the water. I won because my father kept the deed. I won because I took pictures instead of losing control. I won because Dana checked the county records, the surveyor marked the line, and the document said what the HOA refused to admit. Ellery Pond was never theirs. If this story made you think about your own property, your family land, or some community access claim that never felt right, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Save the deeds. Save the emails. Save the brochures. Check the county records before you believe anyone with a sign and a logo. Because sometimes the most powerful thing you own is not the land itself. It is the proof that it was always yours. And in my case, that proof made an entire HOA refund people for a pond they had no right to sell.